Hello, everyone, and welcome to Soul and Science, a podcast where psychology meets ancient wisdom. Season 2 is about the journey from being victim to victor. We're in conversation on episode 8 to rebuild trust and using intuition, self compassion, and willingness with our ancient wisdom guide and spiritual teacher, Ardaas ji. Welcome, Ardaas ji.
Thank you, Nyana. Thank you, everyone, for connecting, tuning in for the podcast.
So you've been on this really amazing journey, Ardaas ji, from unpacking what it is to have victim consciousness and the story around being a victim when the trauma actually happened, and that how we can separate ourselves from that story or from that pain and from that identity that we take on when we are in a traumatic situation or we've grown up with trauma, and how we can start looking forward um, with this new sense of victor, which comes from connecting back to our true self, our essence, our aspects of our being that may have shut down in order to keep safe, and all the defenses we created along the way. And in our last episode, Adashi, we talked about how we can heal these limiting beliefs that we take on during the time of trauma, which keep us fused with the identity of the victim. And that as we start healing the limiting beliefs, we create a separation with the ability to come into our essence and our true self. And so today we're going to be talking about this big piece around rebuilding trust and the possibilities that open up around just possibility and choice when we begin to heal trauma and begin to become a victor. So, any thoughts of what you may have from last episode and what your thoughts are on this particular piece around rebuilding trust and intuition specifically?
Yes, so that's a good introduction from where we come from, right? We've been dealing with this suffering and the pain that was making us close into our trauma, and by being close within ourselves, we didn't have a wider perspective of what's available to us, and that's how we have created these limiting beliefs and behaviors that restrict the amount of vision that we can have for what could come for us. So the destiny, no, we cannot see our destiny. We cannot see any life outside of where we are because we are caught up in this trauma. And you're talking about this idea of from victim to victory, and I was thinking, well, maybe we need to emphasize what does victory mean, right? We are not fighting against anyone. We are not even fighting against our own demons. There was this concept of the dragon and the demon and all that. But it's about victory in a way is to reach the true self, to find who we truly are, and in a way manifest that in some way that is aligned. So being aligned with that, who we truly are, being able to move in a destiny, so to move forward in our life, to serve other people with our capacities, with our capabilities, whatever gifts we have been given in this life, and whatever we have learned in this life, also through the traumatic experience that was the gathering of the treasure and the gift. So gathering all that to put it in service of others, and also to make sure that whatever we are doing is aligned with that inner self. So that would be kind of my understanding of what victory would mean in this context. But
Yeah.
in order to do that, we have to be able to see that the path ahead, we have possibilities to move ahead. There's possible directions in which we can go. And you were mentioning this word intuition. So before going in too much depth into intuition, let's first see why is intuition important at this stage. Because first of all, when we were in the pain and the suffering, that's closing our heart. Okay, when
Mm.
we suffer, we close our hearts and we put all these layers of armor on top of us, which is defense mechanisms, but also insensitizes us to what could be there. And in yoga, we understand that when the heart closes, intuition stops. So there is a direct link between the heart and intuition. Even though in yogic terms, if anybody practices yoga, they will recognize that it's two different chakras, the heart and the third eye. But the third eye is connected to the heart. So if the heart is closing, the third eye also closes. And therefore, we don't have access to that intuition. So now that we are dealing with the trauma, staying away from the suffering, even though there may still be pain, and we are finding the courage to start trusting more and opening up and letting go of the beliefs and even facing the unknown and uh, opening up the what we thought it was possible. Yeah, as we are able to do that, the heart is also opening up. Therefore, the intuition can open up, and now we can start perceiving much more. So
Yeah.
that's my first understanding of why does the intuition come into place in this very moment.
I really like what you said here and makes it just brought a lot of things together for me when you were talking about the victim to victor. And I see that as light at the end of the tunnel, cliche as it may sound, but really when we're stuck in this darkness of being in that story with no way out. And we hear a lot of people talking about, I'm stuck in this darkness, I'm stuck in these repeating patterns, I'm stuck. And there's almost this desire to come out of it and lean into something bigger and greater, and can sense that there is a lean, like a pull towards that. And that this suffering is that when your heart closes down and then you're not able to perceive, and when you're not able to perceive, then everything seems dangerous, dark, and we live with that fear and unsafety. And when we're talking and we armor up, which is so beautiful in the way you said that, because that's really what we're doing with taking away the limiting beliefs
Right,
and the defense mechanisms in a therapeutic or yogic setting. We're kind of taking away um, these old beliefs and these old armors that have kept us safe for so long, with the caveat that the trauma no longer exists. If I'm still living with an abuser, that's a different story. Then
right,
maybe trauma is necessary.
right.
But assuming that you're out of that situation, then you've got the possibility of not living with all this armor in the only way you know, with safety, with fear, without trust in the world, and you perceive everything not for what it is, but as danger, possibly, or unsafety. And it takes away a layer of what is actually is, right? Which is the ability to see something for what it is versus the layers of things that we project onto it because of our experience. And then this taking away of this armor allows us to become lighten the load, come closer to our true self, as we talked about last time, and from that start living with more safety in our existence, safety in and we talked a lot about safety and its importance in the previous thing, and that there is more room to move and be in this world, and the ability to receive and see possibilities, the horizon, that there is no one way to be, and I don't have to live defended, and I don't have to live, like small, and there is room for me to expand into seeing the possibilities. And there is choice today, which wasn't available to me before because I was living with all these defenses that had kind of taken away my ability to see what is. And now with that, I'm able to really see what is, and I may be seeing this something completely else, without anything changing, but my perception has changed because now I can actually perceive more clearly with the heart and the third eye, as you said in yogic. And in psychology, we say when you're able to, clear your perception of the traumatic imprints, and then all of a sudden you're living a very different existence than you were a few years ago.
Yeah, and even that clearing that perception, I would like to name it uh, also in a specific way because, especially as you said, if we are already outside of the situation that created the trauma, um, we are still imprisoned in the mentality of being a victim, and and we don't see any way out. That's a prison, really. That's literally a prison, right? You cannot get out. But who is the jailer of that? You are,
Mm.
right? And initially, yes, you let's say you had a terrible experience and you were the victim of that experience, if you want to call it like that. You felt like that, certainly. But now, if you are really outside of that experience that was over, that's some time ago, the fact that we may feel that we don't have the capacity to deal with stressful circumstances in life, or we don't have the capacity to deal with a person who could be a violent person or anything. Whenever we see something and we feel in danger and we feel we don't have the capacity to deal with that, then we close ourselves into that prison again. So that perception is the, in a way, our own jailer, and we lock ourselves with that. So by removing that perception, and which, limiting beliefs are linked to that, by removing these limiting beliefs, is like opening up this jail, and now we are capable of, living a different life. Because as long as we cover what we have been already talking, right? The feeling of safety, covering our needs, our basic needs are covered, we feel safe. Now we can face life in a different way.
Yeah, and what you said that this is a prison, and I really like that it actually is a prison, the prison of our identity as a victim. And we're stuck in it with fear, shame, guilt, and this belief that I am a prisoner. And like you said, who's the jailer? I am the jailer myself. And it becomes, we take on the voice of this that is constantly shouting at us and screaming at us and telling us we need to be small because that's the only way we know that we are safe. And that some when it gets stuck in the body's pattern of automatic response is to continue to respond in that way, which is why trauma gets lodged in the body. And that coming and removing these limiting beliefs is an equally somatic experience where you're taking in the body to learn that it's no longer in danger because now it's wired that way. And that's the prison, is the wiring, it's the conditioning, and that we have to with therapy and yoga in movement create new ways of movement which are safe, which are saying I'm no longer a prisoner. I'm no longer a prisoner to my habits. I'm no longer a prisoner to my automatic responses. I'm no longer a prisoner to my automatic belief of being a victim. And so I don't need to keep going in those same patterns again. And it's the ability to then create response flexibility because now I am separating or differentiating, as we call it in psychology, from this belief that I am a victim or I'm stuck or I am not good enough, and connecting more to our essence that has the ability to say, hey, I can see that there is this voice that keeps judging me, keeps saying mean things to me. It's called the inner critic, but I'm not that.
Yeah.
So I don't need to behave in the same way anymore because I'm not 5, 6, 7 anymore. I'm not 10, 11, 12 anymore. I'm not 22, 23 anymore. I am who I am today and I made it. I've survived. I've made it. And that ability to rebuild the safety and trust that today I'm capable. I can handle what is coming up for me. And I know I don't need to be in the same patterns that I was in before. And that's
Yeah,
separate.
and we can also say I am not that, to the victim mentality. I am not that victim either.
Yeah. And saying it with a lot of compassion,
Mm.
of recognition, because that other voice is always like, you're such a loser, you'll always fail, you'll always be bad at what you do. And I see that a lot with in clients, and I've lived with it, that it goes on as and we start and we believe those thoughts.
Yes, well, now you touch a very important point, yeah?
Mm.
Because when we talk about compassion, we sometimes confuse it with pity. And pity is in the mind. Compassion is something that you feel in the heart. Pity is when you feel pity for yourself for whatever you had to go through, and me, oh poor me, who am the victim, and we try to convey that to others, for others to take pity on me because, they pay us attention, they give us energy, they feel bad for us, and they embrace us, and this is all feeding this victim mentality. So it's not about that. We're not talking about that. It's
Mm.
compassion, right? And that's in the heart, and that it's gonna start flowing as soon as we start opening up. So
Mm. So with healing comes, it's almost a byproduct is compassion to some extent, because you're able to live more heart-centered. And before, when everything was unsafe, if my intuition shut down, I couldn't even hear myself. I was
Correct.
listening to everybody else. And now it's the journey of rebuilding trust in myself and my inner voice, which is my intuition. And the capacity to say, it's okay, it's safe to listen to my heart. It's safe to listen because to that inner voice. Because for that to also happen, you need to come to a state of a certain amount of stillness. Am I right?
Yes, yes. Yeah, yeah. It's interesting that the first maybe 5 or 6 episodes of this podcast, we were talking about how trauma becomes like a snowball that comes down and it gets even worse and worse and worse. No, something happens, then we retract, then we create these barriers, then we are less sensitive, then we close our heart, then we are not intuitive, then we don't perceive the options, then we close down, and we have less capacity to move. Therefore, more things are happening to us, more close we feel, more pain, more suffering. It's like a snowball that keeps on growing and growing and growing. And what we are now suggesting is that the opposite is also true. The
Mm.
moment you decide to change this mentality, to unchain yourself from this victim feeling, no, that I am a victim, and then you start letting go of these beliefs, and the heart starts opening more, and therefore compassion starts to flow, less pity, more compassion. Then intuition starts to flow. You see more options, you see more choices. The choices are going to take you to a better spot. You're going to feel more free, and it's also snowballing the other direction. So that's the good news, right? And when we are study first the effects of trauma, it's all bad news because it gets worse and worse. But the moment you change, and then that could start like the initial trust of crossing the barrier to go into your consultation, right? Entering through the door, that showing, yes, I want to change. I don't want to continue in that pattern. And then as soon as you start giving some steps in that direction, everything gets better and everything is accumulative, and then one thing brings to the other brings to the other, and they all support each other for the best.
Yeah. And the process of having the ability to trust, because trust is the first thing that's taken away from when there is
Mm,
trauma.
mm,
The trust in
yes,
self, trust in people, trust in the world. And one thing you will hear, a lot of people with trauma will say, the world is not safe, I'm not safe.
yes,
And therefore we talk so much also about safety, not just from a physiological sense, but a physical sense, an emotional sense, a sense of being okay in who I am, and that it's safe to be me as well. And that when you're able to become safer in and become more trusting, you're also able to move away from resistance and counter will, as we call it, to a sense of willingness, greater sense of acceptance, which we talked about, forgiveness last time. That all becomes a part of possibility that otherwise we may not have had before, because of all the other emotions that are present, how we've been wronged, and therefore I continue to be a victim. And therefore all these other possibilities become unavailable, which now suddenly start becoming available as we take away. And so the importance of the process of healing to come to that to the safety of the true self. Because if I continue to be a victim, I will not able to trust, I will continue to remain in that pain and that suffering. And that, with the healing of the limiting beliefs, which is such an important aspect of separation from that identity of being a victim, or you know only bad things happen to me, why do bad things happen to me, these are kind of questions that I hear in therapy. uh, to that trust of everything is happening for me and not to me, and therefore I'm willing to continue to live wholly in life without being defended with all these armors, is a huge movement towards, even though they are baby steps actually,
mm,
be able to trust and be flexible in the response to, okay, I take a step and I'm looking, is there something bad going to happen? Always waiting for the other shoe to drop. Um, Today, in fact, I had a client that said, I'm afraid to be happy.
Mm,
And we had talked about this, the fear of success. What happens if I succeed? Right? What happens if I become happy?
mm,
And that was such an interesting thing because I was like, okay, we want to be happy, but then we resist it because it's unsafe to be happy because there isn't trust that I can either hold it or I'm capable of it or I can handle it. And that just is such a complex experience of the human, the paradox that we talk about, right? Of how we are resisting the very thing that we want for ourselves, and how we
mm.
can trust that we are worthy and deserving of it.
Yeah, we sabotage ourselves. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah.
th- So there's just one thing I wanted to point out to what you were saying about trust. Um, the main trust it has to be towards yourself. I mean, that's the main focus, right? Even though you are working on your fear of what could happen to you, which very often it's just unrealistic and it's just biased to that experience that you had, and you expect everybody's going to treat you the same way, and it's not true, and it doesn't have to be. At the same time, we have to be realistic, and there is plenty of people in the world who could be like the one who harmed you in the first time. Let's say if you were harmed by one person. So it's not about okay, finally I overcome my pain and my suffering and my fear, and I open to the trust again, and I put all my trust into another person, because that other person is going to disappoint you, right? If you put it in that way, no matter how pure the person is, let's say we unless it's a Buddha, right? And how many of these are in the planet, they are gonna disappoint you. Therefore, rather than putting the trust out there, I'm not saying not to trust people. I'm not saying that, right? But I'm saying that the focus should be into trusting in ourselves, what we can do, what we can achieve, what is within us, that we are, there is pure essence within us, right? That has not been touched, no matter how terrible it is, whatever happened. There's a pure essence within us that is unsoiled, untouched, and stained, yeah. And
Mhm.
we can tune into that, and we can trust that that's within us.
Yeah.
And that's actually going to connect to intuition in a moment. But let me just say one more thing then. And then we can also, trust has to be earned. We can connecting through people, we can allow ourselves to trust people who deserve that trust, and see how the relationship progresses, not fully coming out of our hole and grabbing the first person in front of us and really becoming very attached to them, because that would show like you need something and you're attaching to somebody because you don't find it within you. So again, it would be about, can I cover my own basic needs within myself? So that's one thing. But yeah, okay, we can open to trust other people, and without putting unrealistic expectations. um, but it's also when we are facing life from the yogic perspective, if it's about expect the best but be ready for the worst.
Mm.
Yeah, which is very different from expect the worst, which is the place where we are when we are in the trauma space. But don't just expect the best, and that's it, right?
Mm.
Yes, I expect the best, but I am ready in case something happens. If that person betrays me, I'm going to be ready for that. So I don't just put all my trust into somebody else. And let me just connect one moment to the intuition then, because the word intuition comes from in. It's intuition. Tuition means teaching, so it's like a teaching from within, a part of us that can teach us something, that can tell us something that is generally hidden. It's unknown or secret or mysterious or unrevealed in some way, something that we cannot perceive with our own eyes, and it's hidden. And somehow that there is one part of us, there is an inner tuition, yeah, that can tell us, that can teach us, tell, that's actually good for you. So that's the inner part that we need to trust. Yeah. So when we are talking about putting the trust in something, it has to be on this part of us that can tell us something that is greater, and is there is some wisdom, there is some essence within us that is pure, and it can perceive these things that are generally unseen. So that's why sometimes we talk about intuition. It's not about, being able to predict the future, not about that, even though, we may have glimpses of things that may come, in the way that, sequences of actions may cause consequences, and intuition can tell us something in the line of those consequences to be in advance of that. But that has to come with that inner trust.
Yeah. As I'm going to stay with all of these things that you've said and link it to some things that we talked about in the past, which is how do we build that trust within ourselves?
Hmm.
Uh, because most of the time, the trauma is there is something wrong with me. I'm not good enough. So I need to listen to other people. I'm seeking approval. I'm seeking validation. I don't trust myself. I think it's my fault. I only make mistakes, etc., etc., etc. Now I'm completely switched off from my ability to trust. And so I'm always looking. And then the healing journey happens. And then we talked about really important these gifts, right? That as the important part of building trust is listening to the gifts, the lessons that we need to learn, because that becomes part of the wisdom with which we're able to trust our life. And so that when we go out there, we're not clinging to the first, we use
Right.
these lessons to discern what is, to not repeat, because the whole idea is that we repeat those patterns because we haven't learned the lesson.
Right.
But if you've learned the lesson, we're open enough to the lesson and not say, okay, fine, why does this keep happening to me? It's constantly happening because you haven't learned the lesson yet. You're repeating the pattern and it's coming out to be exactly the same thing. So there's something needs to change. And once a lesson's learned, I will probably alter that. I'm giving an ideal situation and simplifying it. But then that lesson becomes the wisdom to be able to trust that now I have wisdom to take the next step. So next time I get into something, I will look at what those lessons had taught me, and then the ability to say, okay, because something inside me will tell me, hey, think about that, you know, and whether I choose to override that voice or not. And that voice is
Right.
the intuition or the inner teacher. And that's really interesting also for me with the intuition is a lot of times people ask me, how do I know it's my intuition and not my fear speaking?
Exactly. That's the question. Yeah.
So I was going to bring
Exactly.
that to you, Ardaas ji.
Well, I was going to ask you what was psychology, but that's the key, because we are used to listen to a number of voices within us, including the inner critic that you mentioned before. And now we're talking about listening to another voice within us, calling it intuition, but we got to learn to differentiate one from the other, because otherwise we could be digging a hole even bigger for us.
Absolutely, absolutely. So do you want me to go ahead or do you want to go
Yeah, you
first?
go ahead. You go ahead.
So I mean, I'm going to be honest. I did not know the answer of this question. And my understanding of intuition purely came from the yogic path. So I think a lot of what I'm sharing is from there and not psychology. But I mean, the intuition is for me something that does not have a charge. So when there is fear, there's a charge. So the words that it uses it has a charge to it. And it evokes a certain kind of an experience in me. Whereas when I listen to the intuition, it actually has no charge. And it almost gives me a sense of knowing that this is the right thing. Um, and the quality of both of those are very different. So one definitely for me has a charge and will evoke an emotion, whereas the other is neutral and almost feels like it's anchoring me in something. And that's how I have asked clients and people to sort of identify or differentiate between the two voices. Over to you, Ardaas ji.
Oh, I like that. It has no charge. I really enjoy that. Okay, so let me put the context as I understand it. There's actually probably a myriad of voices, like a cacophony of voices within us speaking, and some of them are cognitive and some of them are affective. And let me just, I'm using now psychological terms to try to describe the different kind of voices so that, we understand each other.
We just
But
want to say these voices are nothing to do with hallucinations.
no, 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 no. Yeah, we're not talking,
Not talking
and,
about any kind of delusion
no,
or this thing. We're actually talking about the multiple
right.
voices we otherwise hear as as a human being, and they are. This is what
Yes.
we want to
I-
put as
in-
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there is this joke, the person who goes to the psychiatrist and says, Doctor, doctor, I hear voices within my head. And the doctor says to himself, oh my God, he's talking to himself in his own head? He's crazy. And writing in the paper. So we all talk to ourselves and we all have different voices within ourselves. But definitely we are not talking about hearing voices that tell you to do things and so on, that could be signs of mental disorder. It could be something like that, and that's real, that exists. And we're not talking about that. We are talking about any healthy human who just when you are trying to make a choice, you hear different opinions within you or different feelings and different voices. And this is where I'm coming. There's opinions and talking, thoughts, ideas, words, language, all that's cognitive. There's some intellectual reasoning. Should I do it like this? Because then maybe this happens, maybe the other thing happens. That's an intellectual reasoning, which could be intelligent or not, but it's generally intellectual. Yeah, there's some rational, logical speech that is going on within the head, telling you what you could be doing. And then there's the affective, and when I say affective, I mean it's more about feelings and emotions. So the difference that I enjoy the way you put it is like there is no charge. Now that what it says to me is that we may have a feeling and that has no charge, or we may have an emotion and that's charged. So emotions are emotionally charged. There is an energetic charge which is generally linked to one of the basic emotions, including fear or anger or something like that. And therefore that is already subjective. So when there is an emotional charge, that is much more likely being linked to, well, not likely, that is linked to your subconscious, that's linked to your instincts, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, there is some wisdom in that, and the charge is also there to protect you and to guide you. So instincts are very important, and indeed we need to be in tune with them. So I'm not trying to say instincts are wrong or there's anything wrong. I think if there is a charge, it doesn't mean automatically that there is something wrong with that. We just have to learn what kind of charge and maybe purify that charge. However, there is a different voice within us, and that's the one that has no charge. That's the intuition. And that one, it may come as a revelation, it may come as a moment of clarity, it may come like some lightness in both senses of the word, some elevation, but also light, like seeing something. And sometimes we hit ourselves in the third eye, in the forehead, like, oh, I knew it, right? When I knew I had to do it. So sometimes we have the feeling we have to do something, and then if we don't do it, and then we see the consequences, then we hit ourselves in the forehead. Like, I knew, but why didn't I do it, right? Because I doubted. Who doubted? Well, my rational, logical mind doubted, because the logical mind cannot understand what the intuition is telling us. Let's remember that intuition is perceiving the mysterious, the unknown, something that is hidden, that is not obvious, and therefore probably not logical and rational. So
Hmm.
when the intuition tells us something, we may not understand it. And if we question it and doubt it, actually, one of the things that it does, that when we apply the rational mind doubting this, is actually closing intuition. Because intuition, it takes time to open up, even more in men, according to yoga. In men, it takes even much harder than for women. But imagine finally you are opening this up, and now the mind comes with its own rational, analytic criticisms, and then logically destroys the arguments of the intuition, because there's no arguments in intuition. It's just telling you, I have the feeling I have to do this for no reason. And it's like the mind is like, no, 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 that's too scary. So it shuts down intuition and then it takes longer to open next time. So that's
Mm,
how we have learned to close the intuition and not paying any attention to it. But if we allow it and we can listen to this inner teacher that can perceive the unknown and the mysterious, if we allow that, there is no charge to that. It's not linked to some past experience. It's just a perception, direct perception of something that is hidden and yet we can access it. So it's a wonderful thing.
mm,
But at the same time, we have to be able to differentiate and be real with ourselves, sincere with ourselves. Am I, let's say you have this feeling, I have to do this, but is that coming from a neutral space or is that coming with some charge because I'm afraid to do another thing
mm,
or I'm afraid to miss out some other possibility or whatever? Is there some emotion linked to that? And it's complicated because very often the feeling first comes and comes in a very pure way,
mm,
and then quickly our instincts react to that intuition, and then we become fearful to that image, and then we start creating palpitations, and then the rational mind starts analyzing and calculating, and so there is all these parts within us that we have to keep into the balance. But if we don't trust the intuition, it closes and it closes and it closes and it keeps closing down. And in order for it to open up, it needs to be able to trust it when it comes. So when we are able to recognize that that's, like you said, like a feeling without a charge, something uncharged feeling, if I can recognize that, can I trust it? And
mm,
the thing about intuition is that it will sometimes make no sense. Like we may feel the intuition to do something, and that intuition is there to protect us,
mm,
so that if we do that thing, there was a bad thing that was going to happen that didn't. Let me put an example. It's getting too abstract. Let me give an example. You are you're going home and there is a shortcut to go home, and you could save 10 minutes of your walk, but because of the street, the way it moves, but it's a dark alley, and you say, oh, let me not go into the dark alley today. Okay, where did that come from? That come from the mind thinking, it's dark, could be dangerous. Does it come from the instincts of the fear of dark spaces and not being able to see if there is a predator hiding in the darkness, or does it come from your intuition telling you, actually, if you go there, there's somebody waiting to rob you, to mug you, so don't go there. And the thing is, the very same idea of not going into one place could come from very different places, but we have to understand where it comes from. And the thing about the intuition is that it doesn't give us any proof. It's not rational. So we may have this feeling, neutral, don't go into the alley, and then you go through the long path, and because you go through the long path, nothing happens to you. But then you are 10 minutes later at home and you're on the whole path. You are like, why did I do it? I'm so silly. I'm sure it was nothing. I'm sure there was no problem. And I'm here losing 10 more minutes of my time. Maybe I'm missing the TV episode that I want to watch, whatever. Well, it doesn't happen anymore. Now the episodes, you can just click on them. But, in the old times, there's, oh, my favorite program is on TV. I don't want to miss it. And you are all the way going around blaming the intuition for actually giving you something valuable.
mm,
And at the end you reach home and you say, you see, it was all safe. But you don't know what could have happened had you gone through the dark alley. And because you cannot prove that the intuition was right, then we distrust the
mm.
intuition. So that's one of the tricky things about intuition. It can sometimes tell you something, and if you follow it, nothing happens. And you
Mm.
should be happy that nothing happens, but because you don't know the alternative, then we mistrust it. So
Yeah, that's such an important thing you said because I can vouch for most people if I ask them, and please, people, comment if you will, that when they haven't listened to that voice, they've always regretted it.
the voices?
That if they haven't listened to their intuition, they have always regretted it,
Oh, regretted. Yeah. Okay.
you know?
Yeah.
And but the interesting thing about trusting that is able to trust yourself to able to trust the intuition.
Yeah. Yeah. Good.
And trusting oneself comes with the capacity to build responsibility and accountability
Right.
for the choice and the consequence. To listen to that intuition or not listen to that intuition. Because the big thing, like you use the word blame, blame is saying, I'm not responsible for this choice, even though you made a choice,
Yep.
right? In either listening to the voice or not listening to the voice. But we still want to blame because we're not willing to take responsibility and say, that was amazing of me to do, and I'm willing to face the consequences of not listening to that,
Mm.
or willing to take accountability for the choice that I made. And when you're able to do that repeatedly and consistently without blaming somebody else for the consequences, then you're building trust. Then you're building capacity to say, I can listen to that voice because whatever happens, that's on me.
I own it. Yeah.
I own it.
Yeah.
And I'm capable of handling whatever comes. And that again, within that is the lesson to be learned. Within that is the wisdom that, okay, next time I will listen to the voice
Mm-hmm.
of my intuition, because when I don't, I recognize like that's a voice. That's been one of my biggest lessons of life, is that when I'm not listening to my intuition, when I'm out of the door and it says, um, carry a XYZ today. And I'm like, why would I do that? And then I go back in and I take it and I'm like, oh wow, amazing. Um, Something as small as an umbrella, right? And you're like, it's not going to rain today. And then lo and behold, somewhere in the middle of the day, out of nowhere, it begins to rain. And that's it. It's just this very small example.
Mm-hmm.
But then if you're stuck, oh my God, it's raining. Why should it rain? It's the middle of May, etc., etc., etc. But what we're doing is we're deflecting the fact that, hey, I heard something in me and I didn't listen to that. And I'm not willing to take responsibility and accountability that something did kind of tell me take an umbrella.
Right.
And that the big step in rebuilding trust, intuition, willingness, self compassion is really able to take ownership and accountability of one's choices and whether to listen to that voice or not, and whatever comes with that, including I choose not to listen to that voice, then say I get mugged or robbed or whatever, and then I'm like, why does all this bad stuff happen to me? um I'm unsafe, or that's a big part of being victorious,
Mm.
um is owning that.
Nice. For a moment, I felt like I am a businessman, and I have in all the voices within me are my fellow workers, right? Like the intuition wants to speak, and the instinct, and the intellect, and I was like, the good leader is the one who takes responsibility. The good leader is the one who says, when you reach the victory, it was a teamwork effort. And if there is some problem along the way and there's some consequences, is the leader who takes responsibility, right? So it's about taking a responsibility for what's happening within me, for what I hear, from what I decide, from the choice I make, and the consequences that this choice is going to bring. Look, if the consequences are painful, we're going to deal with them, but it would be, actually, we don't have to suffer them, right? It can be painful, we deal with them, but we deal with them with this responsibility, and that's maturity as well. That shows
Mm.
maturity of character. When we want to blame others, even within ourselves, blaming the intuition, let's say, from the intellectual realm, then that's not taking responsibility. That's just trying to avoid and then blaming others. That's not maturity. That we haven't learned anything through that.
Yeah.
So
But having said that, I just want to again put a caveat there that it may be true that when you were younger and you experienced a trauma, you didn't have the capacity to take the responsibility and accountability. And it doesn't mean that in every situation, when you are possibly younger and you're being abused, it's not to say that that was a choice that you made and it's your fault. We're not, that's not what we're trying to say here either. We're saying the journey of healing allows us to become more aware of the choices that we're making and to build the capacity and character to take responsibility and accountability for those consequences of those choices based on wisdom and the lessons learned, and to tap into intuition, um, so that we're living a more desired life.
Yeah, we don't talk about choosing what happened to you, right? We are not in control of that.
Mm,
And you know, a lot of it is just karma. It happened to you. What we are talking is about taking responsibility for what you do with that. So
mm,
the emotions that I feel and the thoughts that I think, that I can change, that I am responsible. Whatever happened, it happened. Okay. And I didn't choose to go through that. Fine. You know, it was karma, let's say. But I can choose now, how do I think about that? How do I think about myself having gone through that? And how do I feel about that? That we can make a choice.
yeah, and that's really the space of healing where we're able to step out of, I don't trust myself, I'm a victim, and I continue to see myself into the space of, that's not who I am. What happened to me does not determine who
Yes.
I am. And that becomes the journey of then getting to know my true self and coming closer to that sense of the giving myself the ability to trust myself once again. But having said that, Adashi, we have some time. I would really want to go deeper into how do we build that intuition and stronger. And I think hearing what the yogic perspective has to say would be very helpful to us.
All right. Yeah. So there's a lot of things to build intuition, and including a certain breath that maybe that could be the tip for today,
Beautiful.
since you asked for that. And well, the first tip of all is I mentioned no that when the heart is closed, the third eye is also closed. And you were when we were talking about the prison in today's conversation, you mentioned how the body is connected to the mind, and then there is some somatic part of all this. And I was just thinking how interesting that the very rib cage looks like a prison,
Mm,
right? And those become like our armor. Yeah, that's like our armor to the heart. It's protecting the heart. Literally, it's protecting the heart. And because of that connection, body, emotions, mind, spirit, if you want to undo your armor, let go of the armor and open the jail, you can do that also through opening the heart, the chest cavity.
mm,
So when we are breathing deeply,
mm,
these things that we were practicing the first and the second days of the first episodes of this season, the breathing deeply, one of the side effects is that as you expand your breath, you also expand the chest cavity, which opens up the rib cage and actually frees your heart. So a very nice side effect of breathing deeply is already starting to open up the heart, which is the needed requirement to open the intuition. So that's already being in place. And staying within the opening of the heart, not so much about intuition, but about the opening of the heart. There is these exercises in yoga where we hold the hands, interlocking the hands, but behind your back, and stretching the arms, and that really pulling the shoulder blades together, pressing with the shoulder blades against the spine, pressing forward, and that's really opening the chest. That's a really really nice feeling to open the chest, to open the jail, and get the heart free. And
mm,
also has the beautiful side effect that it presses in the back of in your back between the shoulder blades, which is a point that is associated to betrayal. So
mm,
when we feel betrayed in life, We feel like somebody stabbed me in the back. And
Mm,
that expression, I think it's quite literally the way, we use that expression to literally describe a feeling that happens right between the shoulder blades, and there is some like cellular memory of the betrayal right there. So
mm,
if we are talking about trust and we want to trust again, we have to deal with betrayal as well, and that can feel like that, the knife on the back. So doing this posture of stretching the arms and interlocking the fingers behind the back and stretching the arms, even bending forward, that can be quite interesting as well. And then inhaling deep and going up and really, really pulling up with the arms. And if
mm,
you stay like that for a minute, then when you release, you can feel uh, like everything opening up, the cells releasing the memory, and it's very healing to the feeling of having been betrayed. So that's a lovely exercise to start opening the trust. That's the first ingredient, I would say. A second ingredient would be that, as I mentioned, intuition is like, I didn't use the metaphor, but let me use it now. It's like a flower. It starts
mm,
to open up. And it takes a long time to open, but it starts to open up. And if the moment it opens up, we start putting the finger inside, look, it's a beautiful flower. It closes, right? So we cannot, when we have this a little bit of intuition opening up, we cannot go rationally with the mind, analyzing, criticizing, and this inner critic focus towards the intuition. We cannot do that. Well, we can do that, but if we do that, it closes again. So if we want to uh, keep opening up this beautiful flower of the intuition, it's represented like a lotus flower in the third eye. It then it needs we need to trust it even if we don't understand it rationally or logically.
mm.
So if the intuition comes, even if it's not rational or logical, can we just accept it? Can we just even trust it? So that's another element for when it starts to happen, to accept it.
And
Another element.
ask you a question here,
Yeah,
Ardaas. Are
go
we
ahead.
born with an open intuition?
Say it again.
Are we born with the open intuition?
I would say it's likely gonna be, not necessarily. It's probably gonna be a mixture of things. There's gonna be uh, the influence of your mother when
Mm,
you were in the womb, and that's influencing the baby a lot. What happens with the mother in during the pregnancy. Then there is also a matter of your own signature, whatever you bring with your soul from previous lifetimes into this lifetime. So if you work hard on neutralizing the mind and opening your intuition in this lifetime, it's likely that in next lifetime you're already more capable of tuning into that. It's true that children will have less of a barrier and this inner critic, and they are more willing to accept something that is not rational, even the existence of fairies and all sort of magic creatures. That shows of the innocence of children, sometimes even naivety, yeah, but that innocence is also important to deal with something that we don't understand, in this case the unknown, through the intuition. So children will be more capable of accepting that, more willing to do that, especially up until they are 7. No, then it becomes a bit harder, but it will be a variety of factors, I would say.
And the intuition you said, when you say, look, it's open, look, it's open. What can you give us an example of that?
Of what?
Of when you said it's like a flower, but if you keep poking at it, then
Yes, it's the poking is the rational mind analyzing it. So we have a feeling and intuition, like to take the umbrella, right? Like you mentioned. And then the mind is going, oh, come on, you don't be silly. And the umbrella is heavy and you're going to be carrying all the time, and it's going to be poking and, uh, being critical of this feeling that you just had, that you might need an umbrella. So that's like poking the flower. The flower really closes like that. So next time it's going to be harder to have another intuition when we do that.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So there was one more thing I would mention for to help us build the intuition and open it, which is meditation, obviously. Because, and you know, a lot of the meditations in yoga are done while focusing the eyes on the third eye. So looking upwards towards the point between the eyebrows. And that's because that's the point what we call the sixth chakra, and that's the one that we associate to intuition. So, and also it's not a coincidence that we do that, because in meditation you may have access to unusual experiences that you don't want to analyze rationally.
Mm,
So part of the process of um, the indications, the instructions that they give us to focus on the third eye is so that our intuition is open enough so that if any experience comes, we may understand it intuitively, not
mm.
rationally, not try to criticize the experience, because that could happen very easily. So that's why it goes together. So in intuition, sorry, meditation, and particularly meditation while focusing on the third eye, that's going to have an effect of helping to open the chakra and therefore be more capable of accessing the intuition.
Okay.
Then one more thing I would like to say, not just to question the intuition in the moment. Sometimes we are more open, sometimes we are more closed, and that's normal in all of us. Sometimes we have a very clear intuition and we are in a moment of light. Yeah, we don't have to say necessarily you are enlightened, but you are for a moment a little bit enlightened. Yeah, and you see light, meaning that you see through the darkness of your life and you understand something you didn't understand before, and you see the light at the end of the tunnel, like you were saying. You see, oh, you know what, maybe this is the path for my life, and you understand you should do something or some choice that could be available to you. All right. At that moment, you saw that. The moment you were clear, you saw that. Let's say next day you are feeling bad. The trauma comes back, something triggers the experience, that you are in the hole, you're in the darkness, and you are ready to question everything. So I would impose, or I impose on myself this one rule: to not question in the dark what I see in the light. So even if one day I'm in a dark space and I don't understand anything and I'm feeling very negative, and that's fine. We are all sometimes in that space. We can all experience a bad day. We can all have a bad day. But when you are having the bad day, to absolutely not allow myself to question everything that I decided when I was in a good day. So when I was in the light, let's say. So if we make a choice in the light, to not question it when we are in the dark. If
Mm,
we doubt it, we can say, well, look, I don't know it right now, but next time I'm feeling connected, next time I'm feeling light, and next time I feel that, I've meditated and I'm more neutral and less subjective, next time I'm going to check again that decision and see if I have to change anything or if I'm still aligned. But right now, today, I don't feel it. I'm in a dark spot. I'm in a hole. I'm not going to question that decision. And I think that's a good attitude to have so that we don't mess up, because often we make the, the biggest choices in the wrong moments. And especially for women who, your emotional state changes throughout the moon cycle quite a lot. It's very easy for a woman to change the space of the life of the moon cycle where she is in a different emotional state and maybe more insecure, and start doubting everything that she had decided that it was right for her in the previous state, and then start doubting everything. So I think it requires a little bit of discipline, but it's healthy to say, well, when I am in this insecure mode, let me just not let me be insecure about my insecurity. Okay, let me doubt my doubts, and let me just not make any choices these days. Let's wait
mm.
a few days and then I will make new choices, and I will take responsibilities in a few days. Right now, let me just stay away from making choices.
Beautifully and well said. Especially because the moon tomorrow is a full moon, I suppose.
I don't know actually.
Yeah, I believe it's maybe it's an eclipse or something like that tomorrow.
Okay.
So maybe not. But what would be then, since we're coming to a close, I'd asked you about strengthening the intuition, is you said that there would be a breath
Oh
or
yes, yes,
that
yeah.
you share with us that would help us strengthen our intuition.
there is one little breath to build intuition, and it's from Kundalini Yoga. So if we are doing this, I would recommend to tune in first, yeah, and then close it. But it's basically you interlock the fingers and you stretch the index fingers. And you put this in front of your face, not like in front of the face, maybe a little bit lower, so that, let's say, kind of like the fingertips of your index fingers are in line with your nose, kind
Mm.
of, yeah. And you can even look at the fingertips, but close the eyes almost completely. You leave one little thin, um, how do you say that? Like a
Well,
space in the eyes so that the light comes in. You
mm,
can see a little bit of light, or you can see a little bit the fingertips, and you focus the eyes there. And the breath is very specific. You inhale through the mouth in a circle 4 times to get full. So inhale 25% of the capacity, 25, 25, 25. So and then you exhale through the nose in one. So it's inhale, 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 inhale through the mouth, exhale 1 time through the nose, kind of like this. Kind of like this, and you keep the rhythm. So it's 4 inhales, 1 exhale, that's 5 seconds, more or less.
mm,
While looking at the fingertips, that's gonna stimulate the third eye, and it may become very heavy. The
mm.
the forehead may become very heavy, but if you allow it, at some point it may dissolve itself and be released. And there is no time limit really for this exercise, so you can do it 11 or 15, 16 minutes, something like that. It's even fine. But even if just 3 minutes would already have some effect. Try to relax the shoulders and the body. Keep the heart open. Even though the hands are in front, don't close the heart. Keep the heart open and the shoulders down. And yeah, just doing that focused breath.
Thank you so much for that, Ardaas ji, and for helping us understand how we can build our intuition and really listen to that voice within that has no charge and is the inner teacher. Uh,
Yes. Hmm.
and we're always looking for answers. And the welcome and the invitation here is to listen within, is to look for the answers within. The inner teacher, the inner guide, everything we've ever wanted lives within.
Yes.
Um, and that is the sense of victory and knowing that I'm okay and I'm truly now in control because I can listen to my own voice of wisdom. Um, because I know that we are all born with the answers to the questions that we have.
Hmm.
Thank you for helping us build that with that beautiful breath, and for all the yogic understanding of intuition, because I don't think we fully understand it otherwise, scientifically or in psychology as much. But thank you so
Not
much.
yet. Not maybe not yet.
Maybe not
Someday.
yet. Yes, absolutely. But thank you so much for that, Ardasji, as always. And thank you, everyone, for listening to us. We will see you again next week, same time, for episode 9. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you, Nyana. Thank you, everyone. See you next week.